Uh, Sorry.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hi, hello. Sorry about that. I got late in the meeting and everything got delayed. So, how is everybody? How many of you?
You're good. Thank you so much for joining. So I'm Ty,
And I'm Grana.
and we're part of Interpunct, which is a student publication at Carnegie Mellon.
Right,
So we
right,
have-
okay. Are you editors or what? Are you editors of the publication?
I'm the editor. Grana
I'm a writer for
is a
it.
writer.
All right, great. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so which year are you guys in? What year?
I'm a fifth year, and Grana's
And I'm a
third.
third year.
Okay, all right.
And we're both
Okay.
undergrad.
Okay, all right, nice.
Mhm.
Okay, then, so what are the questions you want to ask?
All right. So I guess we'll just give an intro maybe for some of the people sitting in. These are also faculty and some students also in our School of Architecture. So it's my honor to introduce Yasmeen Lari on behalf of Interpunct for an interview on the topic of architectural practice. If you guys aren't familiar, Yasmeen Lari is Pakistan's first female architect who has made large contributions to the Pakistani community through her NGO Heritage Foundation, which she founded in 1980. Additionally, Yasmeen received the Jane Drew Prize in 2020 for making a significant contribution for women in architecture, and her more recent work focuses on natural disaster relief, refugee shelters, and the vernacular. So once again, it's my pleasure to introduce you all and Yasmeen to Carnegie Mellon School of Architecture. And we'll just begin with our questions.
Yeah. So our first question is: so you've had a remarkable career. First as a architect for 36 years, and then transitioning into more humanitarian work. And we're wondering what you think the role of the architect is and how it's changed over the course of your career as you've kind of shifted your approach.
Okay, and the name is Jaisal, is it? How do you spell your, how do you pronounce your name?
It's Taisei. I go by Ty.
Ty. Okay, all right, Ty. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Grana and Ty, for inviting me. And I'm very happy to always talk to young people because I think what I say somehow resonates more with them than people who are older. So it's always a pleasure for me. And I've had in the last month, actually, I've had lots of opportunities to talk to a lot of young people. I was in, at the Human Rights Festival at Oxford, and at Oxford Brookes, I met a lot of young people who are studying architecture, and there were lots of master classes I took, and of course met a lot of faculty members as well. And then I was at gave my talk at RIBA. I don't know whether you saw it or heard about it, but that went on quite well. There were lots of young people there as well. And just 2 days ago, I think it was, when I also gave a lecture at the what is called Spitzer School of Architecture in New York. And I had a seminar the next day. So it was very interesting, the questions that were raised. And I think this is something that we all have to think about, because the role of the architect, I think, has changed or should change. I'm not sure whether it's changed so far as much as I would like to see, but it should change, because I think the world is very different from when I was trained. And as you must know, if you've seen any of my work now, what I do now and what I say now, that unfortunately, even today, architects wait for commissions to be provided to them so that they can design for somebody. And mostly the people who are, privileged, who are elitists and so on and so forth. And they still love designing these mega structures and iconic structures. And I feel that that time is long past. I mean, I was doing all that in the 1980s, but I feel it's no longer the time to be doing all that. I'm not sure what you all think, and I would really like to hear your comments as well, because I think with climate change, with COVID-19, with rising disparities, with the poverty levels, rising everywhere, things are really pretty disturbing. And architects, I feel, have to play a role in all this. They can't abdicate their responsibility and say, we are only here to design for the rich, because it should not be that way, I believe. So that's where I am today, and I'm trying to do what I say. And I do hope that you all get a chance also to do that, because that's a really very interesting way also to practice architecture. Okay.
And, we're a lot of us are still in school while the COVID-19 pandemic kind of hit us all, and we're all kind of deciding, what role we will take as architects, once we graduate. So we were just curious, to hear, was there like a pivotal moment in your career that kind of made your transition from the previous work you did, like the Pakistan State Oil House, versus some of the more like, traditional and vernacular work that you do now?
Yes. Well, I don't think it's like didn't happen like a flash of light or something. It's just that I decided that I want to do other things in my life, and other things came my way, which I enjoyed very much. And then I was at the Lahore Fort, the World Heritage Site, was a fantastic site. If you ever have an opportunity, all of you, to go there, you must do that. And you also must come to Karachi, of course. And Brianna, of course, might have seen Lahore. Have you been there at all?
Yeah, I have.
You know the Lahore Fort well, huh? So I got this chance, and UNESCO had invited me to become their national advisor to conduct this particular project, which was to do with Sheesh Mahal, which is this fantastic mirror encrusted ceiling of the Mughal period, 17th century. And then I also had a chance to co-author the master plan for Lahore Fort, and I managed to get a lot of documentation done, which I'm very proud of. And I was there for 3 years until the earthquake of 2005 happened, which is a major, major disaster for us. It was a total calamity because there were 80,000 families that were lost, souls that were lost, and there were something like 400,000 families that were displaced. So it really was the worst possible kind of disaster that could have ever hit any country, really. And for us, it was a great tragedy. And I think, like most of the Pakistanis and also from around the world, I also felt I had to go and do my bit. Now, I had no experience in working in disasters. I had no idea what it means. I had no funding for it because I'd given up my practice by that time, and I'd moved to Lahore more or less. And so it was a bit tough, but I felt I needed to go there. I had no idea what I could do. I mean, I knew that doctors and surgeons and others could help because there's just so many lives that were at stake. But I had no idea what an architect would do. But, when you try to do something and you really sort of feel that this is a calling or you have to do it, then you find ways to be able to help. And as it happened, it's going to be very cold weather. And houses had to be built very fast. And I thought the best way would be to use the debris, but there's lots of stone there because it's right up in the mountains. It's a hilly terrain. It's very beautiful terrain. But my God, the disaster that it hit is just awful because it really, there's just nothing but debris that you saw around you in this beautiful terrain. And it was awful to watch it, awful to see it. And really, I think for many of us, and particularly for me, it was a turning point in my life because I'd never understood, never known my country, never known there was so much poverty, never known there was so much misery that could be, and never known the state of women and what they were going through. So for me, it was an absolute eye opener. And unfortunately, my country, and of course, those who come from there know it well, but others who don't know, we have this terrible situation where we have the privilege, we have just about everything, and then we have others who literally have nothing. There's a huge divide between the two. And so for me and many of us, like myself, who'd gone there, it was a total eye opener. We'd never known, what it was like and what real Pakistan was like. So it was a very sobering kind of experience, but very rewarding as well. And so we started off with building with this and with the debris, and I had to learn how to design structures that would be seismic resistant, because everything that you build there should not collapse, obviously. So that was quite a lot of research that had to be done. But I managed that. But you must remember that when it happened, I was, 65 years old. I was very old to be there. And there were these mountains to climb, and I could barely do that. But I had this amazing support that came from everywhere around the world and from Pakistan itself, all these young people who arrived at my doorstep to come and help me out. And this is the lesson I learned, that if you do something like a cause, then there's so many people who will help you. So there's no reason for one to feel that you're doing it by yourself. And I didn't have to. I have had support like anything that all around, all this time. And that's why I'm still in it, because either it's through expertise or people wanting to help, and of course funding also comes, but I feel that funding is not the most important one. We shouldn't really worry about the funding, not in the humanitarian field. Now, having said that, I think some of you or whoever wants to be in that field should not feel that they have to do it for free. With a person like me at my time of life and age, and also because I run an organization which is humanitarian, I of course do everything pro bono. There's no charge for anything that I do today, whether I'm lecturing or whatever I'm doing. And so, but for young people who are starting off or want to have a career in this, I think it's very important that they get paid in some way. And that's where the battle is, that's where the challenge is. So how do we now see that young people or young practices get involved in this kind of work, and also we see that somehow they get paid or they at least get their due. So this is what I'm after now. That's why I'm trying to talk to everybody who I can to see how we could work that out. So I don't have an answer for you, but hopefully in a year's time I might have it.
Thank you. And one thing that you mentioned that we love is the collective effort of it all. It's not just you, but you're really engaging the community. And we're wondering what that process is like, engaging the community, and how is the active empowering? Yeah.
Okay. And Ty, where are you from?
I'm from New York City.
Sorry, in New York City. But your family is from New York City or from elsewhere?
My dad's from Brooklyn, and then my mom's from Japan. So
okay, all right. Okay. So I don't know whether you know, but Japan of course, is one of the most vulnerable countries. Pakistan also is the fifth in line. Okay, so these are real kind of problems for countries such as ours, and we really can't close our eyes to that. So everything we do must be now climate resilient. It must always be something that will be, careful in terms of dealing with climate change and mitigating whatever might be happening. So that's an important thing that we all must learn. And now that all over the world, you have so many disasters all over the world, I think it's a similar kind of situation. So nobody can say what it won't happen to us. I mean, we saw with COVID-19, it didn't matter how many designer objects you had in your closet, it hit, the wealthy just as much as it did the, people who had nothing or had no roof over their heads even. So we have to understand that whatever happens today is not just confined to one area in the world or one country in the world. It is something that's global now, and all of us are in it together. So I think perhaps this understanding is not quite there. I feel that people still feel that they can get away without dealing with these issues. But I think you young people who will be facing, all these challenges as you start your practices, I think you need to be much more aware of what's going on. And I'm sure that you are. I mean, I find a lot of young people are. But the problem with the profession is it's still skewed another way. I think most of the universities and schools of architecture are still teaching about, iconic architecture, about, acting as a prima donna like we were done. I mean, I acted as one, as you know, something like 36 years. And so I feel that there has to be a shift in the way that we start, even our how the courses are and how the teaching is going on and what we do. Now, I was very lucky, and you must understand that I had a very strong support system. I was very lucky. I got into this something that was totally different, and I again got a lot of support from everywhere, literally, And finally, it is working together with people that you're able to do really to, make a difference. And I'm just very lucky again, because I'm a woman. I was able to go into women's quarters, and Rana will tell you more about how restrictive it can be. But I was able to go and talk to them. I could understand them. And they're the ones who spearheaded so many of the things that I did. And whether it was up in the frontier where Rana comes from, but also in the south, which is Sindh, where everywhere there's lots of restrictions on women. But because I was a woman, I could really mobilize them. I could talk to them, and they were the ones who then took everything forward that I did. So I don't know whether many people have this opportunity to be able to work with women. I find that in the humanitarian field, there are very few women who are engaged in this kind of work. So they don't actually go. I mean, it's only men who are there. So you don't see very many women in the field, actually, I mean, from outside, okay? And of course, the ones who are inside are not allowed to move out of their houses or do whatever. So they're very restricted. But I found that as we worked with them more, men also accepted that they were becoming productive, that they're being able to earn, and they were empowered. I mean, there was, of course, there was danger because some thought women might leave everybody else behind, all the men behind, but still there was a lot of support when men found that their either daughters or wives or sisters were beginning to earn some money. And that's what, kept everything going. And yeah, so it's been a wonderful experience for me. I don't know, have you seen my chula, the Pakistan chula, the stove, the earthen stove?
Yeah, so yeah,
Familiar with that?
yeah, that's something we were really interested in about because, in many societies, women are expected to be like the caretakers of the home, but historically have never owned the homes or the property. So you've done a lot of work with women that gives ownership and kind of pride to the spaces that we also largely own. So could you talk a little bit about your project on the chulas and how your experience kind of as the first female architect in Pakistan have framed your approach to your practice?
Yeah, well, of course, I happened to become the first one because I just happened to, graduate before anybody else, but I had no idea when I'd gone to study whether I will be the one, huh? So but then you also carry a lot of responsibility with the first one because you have to make sure that everything that you do is right, and it's I mean, you can't let the site down, okay? So that is something that you have to carry with you. But working in disaster areas and in the humanitarian field is a different ball game, of course, altogether from practicing architecture in cities or becoming a star architect, because then you can have your ego and you can whatever and you do what you want to do. I think when you work with communities, you have to go there with a great deal of humility. And I was very lucky. I was able to get rid of my ego, and I was willing to learn and see what was there and see because I went there to help. I hadn't gone there to dictate to them. And I think the whole attitude of how you work in the field when you're looking at disasters or helping people to to become productive or empower them in some way, then you really have to see what the conditions are and how you are able to help them to do that without imposing your own ideas and thoughts on them. But of course, as you're an architect, you will know that there's something that you must do which will to do with design. And that's why I keep on saying that when you're working with the poor or with people who are disadvantaged, then you need more design, not less, because you have limited resources and you've got to find ways to make things happen with them. And also, it's not just like making a product or like a finite, tangible, like a piece of or objet d'art or a piece of architecture. It is something that must have multiple dimensions. So when you were designing like a chula, now a chula is a very ordinary object. But it's the most damaging for women in countries like Pakistan and many others, because it's an open flame stove that's made out of maybe 3 bricks or stones or something, and then the firewood that they burn emits all this smoke that goes into their lungs, it goes into their eyes, and there's so much illness and disease because of that. And then because they're on the floor, so you get lots of filth, and it's very, very unhygienic the way they have to cook. And then because it's open flame, children can get burnt. I mean, there are lots of fires happening. So because I was working in the disaster field, I decided that, well, this is a partner organization that actually did the scientific part of the chula or the stove. It's a 2-chamber contraption with a chimney. The good thing about it is it's very fuel efficient, and there are studies that have been done. And if you look at the World Habitat Award documents, you will see everything in that, because we got this award in 2018. And so because I was working in the flood area, I decided it must be on a platform. because I believe in making these earthen platforms. They're very inexpensive, but they save you a lot of trouble, because when you have water, rising waters around you, then everything is elevated and safe. And this I've actually, now this has come, it's nothing that I have kind of, I can't sort of be the claim to be the author of this, because in Mohenjo-daro, which is our Bronze Age city that still exists, and it's a World Heritage Site in southern Pakistan, they have used platforms, and that's how they've everything has survived so well. So that's what I promote. We can put everything on a platform, whether it's water, whether it's food, whatever, it'll be safe. So anyway, the chula is on a platform. And so I did the basic design, of course. I told them what to do, but then they have innovated on that, and they have made it into a work of art. I mean, every stove that you will see is a designer stove. That's what I think Le Monde, which is a French magazine, called it. Yeah? It's a boutique stove. And because everyone just makes it as beautiful as they could. And above all, it's brought so much dignity and respect to them. That's the most important thing. That just because they're sitting on an elevated platform, their lives have transformed, because otherwise they were literally not given any importance, because they were sitting on the floor with all the filth. And now this earthen platform is like a throne for them, because they can sit erect. If you look at the posture of women, it's just entirely changed. The women are just very proud now, they're sitting on this platform, they're giving out the food, they're cooking well and clean food, and so on and so forth. There are lots of things that have happened because of the stove. So I think we carry a certain responsibility to somehow bring about really transforming really the way people do things, and especially the way women are treated or are looked at. And I think through architecture, we can do all of that. And they're all self-built, as you know. Nobody goes and builds it for them. The housewife builds it herself. So this is entirely her own creation. Okay.
There was an interesting, you brought up the idea of sustainability, which it has like many definitions depending on the circles. So often in schools here, sustainability is talked about in terms of LEED, and like these big glass buildings, they're like somehow quote unquote sustainable, but it seems like you have a very different view of what sustainability is. So I was wondering if you could talk about what you think the relationship is between architecture and climate change, and what does like actually truly sustainable architecture look like?
Yeah, well, you raise a very interesting question, because of course, you're right. I mean, everybody views sustainability in a different manner. They all, I suppose, saying the same thing, but the roots are very different. And I feel that a lot of times, once you use materials that are high carbon, or like we know that cement and steel are really have a very high carbon footprint because of the energy that's used in production. And if you use it, then you've already done the damage. So I feel the best way is to minimize the use of either steel or cement or any such materials that are really in their production are highly energy consumptive. And then I was just very lucky, again, working in my country where we've had these long traditions. And that's why I keep on going back to heritage and tradition, because I feel that I've learned so much from there. Most of the time, when we are trained, especially people who come from countries like mine, and we are trained in the West, and we go back and think that perhaps we know better than anybody else, but that's not true. And the Western methodology are not always the best ones. And I think especially now with climate change and with COVID-19, I keep on saying that we need to go back to the traditional ways that I've experienced and seen in my own country, which is the materials, and which is like the old towns. I mean, we have some amazing towns. And Grana, do you come from Peshawar? Are you from Peshawar? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So Peshawar is a great city, huh? It's one of the oldest cities and amazing architecture there. But there's one mohalla that I always show, which is the Sethi mohalla, which is just so beautiful that I've never seen anything like it anywhere else in the world, actually. And I had the good fortune to really restore one and save one, because they're all under threat, because most of our heritage in my country is all under threat. And so we were able to save one and restore it. And mashallah, it's so good now, because it's just so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it has a lot of techniques as to how you can, how you can create a microclimate which is livable, which is, you have passive cooling, you have the courtyard configuration, you have water in that, and lots of different elements that are totally, you don't need mechanical means to keep the place cool. So I think we should be looking at all that now, because now the world is concerned. We all want to now lower the carbon footprint and the emissions that happen. The greenhouse gas emissions are they've got to be contained. So, and also if you look at Peshawar's, the narrow streets, it's got this kind of organic morphology, which is actually true for many other old towns in Pakistan as well. And it's got what I call, medium density and low rise kind of structures, which are really good for humans. We don't need to have cars everywhere. We can limit them. And I think that's what everybody must start doing now. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with something called eco-urbanism. If not, then do study it, because there's who is it? Was it Professor Lehman? But I think there's a German professor who's working quite a lot on that, and you will find something interesting there. Also, there are movements such as degrowth and transition design, which are also very useful if you want to study something. And of course, my own bazaar, which is Barefoot Social Architecture, that will also give you some pointers as to how things can be done. Because as I keep on saying, I need both ecological and social justice. If you have one and not the other, then it's for me that doesn't work, because I have to deal with a lot of social injustices in my life, in my country, in the lives of people who are more than 50% are really below the poverty line. So people in my country and countries like ours have to be very conscious of the fact that things are not good for majority. And that's why we need designers and architects to spend some time and see how we can improve their conditions. And as I said, I was lucky. I hit upon this the materials that I'd been using. When I started, I had the good fortune to have worked in the Lahore Fort, where there was lime being used, because when we were conserving, I stopped any kind of cement being used there. With lime has been the material that was used. So I learned how to use lime, which many architects don't get a chance to do. And I applied that in the earthquake area, and then I've been applying it all through. And then when I was working in I think 2009, there was this army action in Swat, and again, Rana will know about that. Swat, and then people were moved from Swat into Mardan, which is again a city in KP in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And I got a chance to go and work with those, especially women. And I discovered I had to make very quickly some community kitchens, because they were all there, women and children, and there was no cooking arrangement. And I found that there was bamboo available, which I used for the first time in 2009. And I hit upon this amazing material that really makes everything I do into zero carbon structures. So really, it's a lot of fate, I think. And perhaps my ability to be able to grab every opportunity that I can, I think that's what enabled me to do what I think is the right thing, right?
And, you mentioned Barefoot Social Architecture, which I found, really interesting, and a different approach to what we traditionally learn in school. As a lot of the time in education, we're designing at our desks, but we're hundreds of miles away from the site, or we never actually visit the sites we're designing for, or meet the people that are going to be living in the spaces that we design. So could you talk a little bit more about the term Barefoot Social Architecture and like what it means to you in your practice?
Yeah, I think, with the years, I've had a lot of opportunity to work in disaster areas, right? Because as I said, Pakistan is really, it's in the path of majority of the countries in the path of these melting glaciers, so we get lots of floods. And there are many fault lines in the country, so we keep on getting these disasters, the earthquakes. And for instance, we've had it in, of course, the first one, 2005, that was the major one, which was again in the north, mostly in KP and also in Kashmir. And which is beautiful terrain, but really very destructive, because that's where, the whole thing just moves and you get boulders coming right down. I mean, it's the most horrific experience to watch a boulder coming down the hill that I have watched. And so we've got to deal with that somehow, because it's all natural, and we have to see how we can do to mitigate. We can't stop it, of course, but we can mitigate disasters, right? Or at least the impact of them. Because as you know, and I keep on quoting this, that it's not disasters that kill people, it's the buildings that kill people, especially in the case of earthquakes. So we carry a huge responsibility to design in a proper manner. And unless we do that, people will suffer. So that is something that we need to do. And I've just had, there was so many floods and there's earthquakes. We had one, of course, in 2005, then we had one in 2013, we had another one in 2015. And again, with the terrible kind of consequences. So I've learned to see how I can handle that. And I've had all this experience. And I also found that I found the approach that came with the international assistance was not the right one, because I call it the colonial Western charity model, which I think is very demeaning for our people. It's very destructive to our morale. I think we should reject it completely. I don't think we should have this charity from anybody. And my view is that we have to now get people to empower them, to make them strong, and also to give them the skills that they can do things themselves. And so the barefoot social architecture that I devised was from that point of view, because the UN system, I don't know how many of you have studied this aid model, or the way, I mean, there was Haiti, there was all kinds of other places where we've had this. Japan, of course, has it all the time. Have you ever studied how the money comes in from UN systems and from INGOs? Anybody has any experience?
My mother actually works for the UN, but I'm not actually quite too sure about where that funding comes from.
The funding comes and everybody thinks that these are poor victims and we must just give them and give them charity. Mm-hmm. It's all done with the best of intentions, with the right people feeling that they need to do their bit in helping others. But I think it's very destructive, because then you start making people used to having handouts. Mm-hmm. And in countries like mine, people have been very proud, even though they might be poor. And suddenly I found the whole attitude change, where people who would not even let anybody know that they were poor now very calmly were extending their hand to accept any kind of charity or a handout. And I felt that I had to fight against that. And it was tough in the beginning, because most of the INGOs and other NGOs believe in that, because see, even disasters is a big game to a lot of people, because there's a lot of money there. And I think money is it corrupts everybody, unfortunately, however good they might be. So I feel the least money there is, the better it is. We should not have too much money at all. And I got a chance to build so many of these units because IOM, who partnered with us, and we were their technical partners and trained everybody to build these. And that's how so many thousands were built. They finally ran out of money because there was donor fatigue. In 2010, 11, 12, we were having lots of floods. All over the world, things were going on, which had high demand for funding. And so they felt that they needed to lower the cost of their products. It used to be very, very high. And then they thought of me because they thought I was a bit mad earlier on, but then they felt, well, okay, let's try, this sort of lime and mud and bamboo. So I'm a great believer in no money, because then that gives you a chance to be able to do things that you feel are, you really are creative then, because you've got to work with very, very limited resources. And I had to do that. And I found it really nice to be able to do it, not to depend on anybody, not to look for money, but to be able to, train people who can then do things themselves rather than waiting for somebody to give a handout. So, whole bazaar philosophy has emerged out of that. And also, I believe in non-engineered structures. I mean, I think you can find it all. I'm sure I must have repeated the whole thing quite a few times, where there are 4 kind of tenets that I believe in, and I can't offhand remember exactly what they were. But one of the more important ones was, of course, the first is empowerment, of course. The other is training. The third, and now, of course, the most importantly, that we should believe in non-engineered structures, not just keep on wanting to have engineered structures, because engineered structures will mean concrete and steel, which is very destructive, as we know, for the environment. So the whole thing somehow is coming together. And I'm very proud and very pleased that although in my country, if you want to build a house and if you want to build a really expensive one, there's no problem. You get loan from the bank, from anybody. Government will give you loans and so on and so forth. But if I want just $200 for a family of the poor, banks are not willing. They don't want to deal with this kind of low level of loans. And I want the loans, but I don't want to take charity, right? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We give loans to people and we provide them the skill and they do it themselves. And as you know, I've got all these video tutorials on YouTube, right? So everybody can now build their own house. This is what I would like to happen, that people should be able to build it themselves. But the hitch is if they're too poor, that they need some money to be able to buy the materials, although they might put in their own effort into it. So if I can secure them $200, then less even now with the Pakistan rupee sliding, then you can, people can build their own houses. They don't have to look to anybody. And now, luckily, I've just been able to clinch a deal after months of struggle with one bank, that's Bank of Punjab, who's willing to give this $200 to something like 100 families. Now, we've already trained their artisans. We've already started a savings program by women who save only 50 rupees per day, but that's be enough for them to pay back within a year. 50 rupees a day means, come on, Grana, you can calculate how much that is.
Yeah, it's like maybe 30 cents now.
Something like that, but that's enough. So what we need to do with these high poverty levels is to see how we can encourage self-building or co-building. Also use concepts and materials that will make them affordable so that the prices are low. And also by training, I mean, with this barefoot social architecture, it's because I believe in a barefoot ecosystem, okay? Because if more than 50% of our population in Pakistan is below poverty line, then I would say that 80% of our population belongs to the barefoot ecosystem, which is poor of one level or the other, right? And that means that they're the majority. That means if we were to design products that they could make and sell among themselves, then everybody will make money. So I don't know whether you've seen it, but there is example of my chula maker, the Champa, who's a Hindu, lots of other issues that she must have faced. But she alone in the last 5 years has been instrumental in getting other women to build a chula, because she doesn't build them, she teaches how to build. She's my entrepreneur, right? So, and she has earned, now she had earning something like 25 times what she used to earn earlier on, which was hardly maybe 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, and now she's 125,000 or more per month. So I feel that if we were to do the right thing and were to teach them what we call unmet needs of the poor, and some people start catering to them, and that's what we teach actually when we are training, then I think there are lots of millionaires that will be created through this whole, what I call the barefoot ecosystem. And so that's why for me, it's very important that I get to them. I don't care about the rich. I don't think we need to have anything to do with them. There's no need for it. Mostly I find that the rich are not at all interested anyway about, the real part of Pakistan. And I'm not interested in the government because the government is highly insensitive to the poor. And certainly not politicians and not the state. I feel that we need to get straight to the people and to be able to provide with them and facilitate the work, and they will do it themselves. So that's what Baza is all about, right?
Should we jump into that?
Sure. I just wanted to say, I found that, really empowering and stuff, because I think a lot of the way architecture's narrative is shifting is towards, we make for people, we don't make objects, we make spaces that people are going to spend time in. And so I think it's really important that, that you mentioned that it's not about the government or people or the rich people who are necessarily uninterested, but it's about, directly the people that need these spaces. And that's what we should be aiming to design for.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you've seen my latest project in Karachi, which is the first eco enclave of the city of Karachi in the historic core of the city.
Mhm,
It's called the Denso Hall Raguzar Walking Street.
mhm.
Have you had a chance to look at that?
I have not. I don't.
Have a look at that as well, because that's all about zero carbon. That's all
Mhm.
about no cement and steel. That's all about making terracotta pavements. That's all about permeable surfaces where the water will at least when it evaporates, it cools the surrounding environment. It's all about Miyawaki style forest. I don't know,
Mhm.
Ty, have you heard of Miyawaki and his forests? The way he plants trees.
I'm not.
Well, you should study him. He's very, very good because it's amazing how quickly the trees grow, and he's done enormous work all over the world, but also a lot in Japan. And anyway, so I've got these 4 Miyawaki style forests in there. And the trees have grown within about oh yeah, not even a year, and they're all maybe 8, 10 feet tall, many of them, and they are cleaning the whole this terrible filthy air that comes from all sides is clean. So I mean in the walking street, everything is very, very, very clean, and the pavements are made by my women who are the poorest of the poor. They were the beggars in the World Heritage Site Makli, where I worked, and we trained them, and then they earn a lot of money by making those terracotta cobbles, and it's all the ancient craft that we're looking at. So you have to keep on linking a lot of things when you're working. I feel that it's not no longer appropriate only to be focusing on one unless it has large scale benefits for many of the other areas as well.
Mhm.
And as I said, as I'm lucky, I got a chance. I now have trained so many. My workforce is I don't know, we don't even count because there's so many people who've been trained in so many different sort of green skills, if you like, which are really to do with low cost materials and sustainable materials, and also in crafts. And I've got, and you might like to study if you're all into climate change and seeing how you mitigate, and especially in urban areas. First of all, just stop using cement and steel, etc. And the pavements must not be concrete anymore. And stop the vehicles. There's no need for so many cars everywhere because I mean the US consists of nothing but except roadways and expressways and God knows what. Very damaging. And and I see no sort of groves of trees being planted in the middle of a roadway, which I've done and very successfully. Also, there's a Chinese professor who was trained in the US. I think he went to Harvard, and then it was Graduate School of Design, and then he gone back to China, and he believes in something called porous pavement or porous pavement, so that some of the water gets absorbed in the soil rather than running off somewhere. So we've looked at all that, and I've been able to create porous pavements in this walking streets as well. So the water, the flood, there's no urban flooding, so to speak. There's no urban heat islands there at all, although it's in the middle of the worst possible area in terms of urban blight. Okay, I don't know whether you understand what urban blight is, but something horrible here in my city in Karachi. And so these are these methodologies that are now available. There's a lot of work going on in the world about all this. A lot of people are concerned. It's not being applied as much as one would like, but at least it's happening. And there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of research happening, so we can always see what everybody else is doing. So do have a look at it's called the Denso Hall Rag Bazaar. It's probably on the Zero Carbon channel. I wouldn't be surprised. And have a look at it and see what you think, because it's got all these different methods of trying to see how do you start creating a humanistic environment in a city. It should not be vehicles. It's not, the cities were never meant to be for machines and vehicles. Cities were meant to be for human beings, and we've got to make sure that they finally will return to that. Right. So anything else?
Yeah, we have about 10-ish minutes left, so we would really like to open up the floor to anybody else who had any questions. If anyone just wants to unmute and ask anything, please feel free.
Sure. I have a question. Hello, I'm
Yes.
Takumi Davis.
Hello.
I'm
What's your name and who is it? Sorry, said who's
I am
this?
Takumi Davis. I am a Master's of Urban Design student at CMU.
Okay.
And I had a question about the barriers that you face as a woman going towards architecture in Pakistan at the time, and if you have seen any change towards the culture towards women going into architecture or similar fields.
If I've seen, sorry, what architecture similar to mine? Have I seen it? You mean? How do you? I don't
Any
understand.
change towards the culture that people have towards women entering architecture or other
Yes.
fields in Pakistan or elsewhere?
Well, you shouldn't look at me, okay? Because listen, I was trained in the last century, all right? You must remember that. Today, the world has changed. Pakistan has also changed. I mean, I think that Ghana can tell you, but there's just so many young women who are now training as architects. I think there are more women in schools of architecture than there are, young men. So I think, and Pakistani woman today, especially the urban woman, is doing so many things. I mean, we've got pilots, we've got mountaineers, we've got all kinds of ways that they're excelling in, and they're very, very good, right? So the young woman in Pakistan is doing extremely well. The only issue that we have is really in the rural areas where there's still very much kind of, the society is very, very conservative. And that's why I feel if we focus on women and empower them, then gradually the whole conception of what women can do will change. And we've got to bring about that change. Because we cannot keep, more than 50% of our population without being able to achieve their potential. I mean, it's got to be done. And so now with our, especially with the loan I just talked about from the bank, I've decided, or I told them it's got to go to women. So we've got these committees, they're called the MA committee, which is the Mother's Help Committee. And they are the ones who will be receiving the money and dispersing, but everything will be given in the name of the women, not at all men. So the women start having a status that is denied them so far. We've got to work at it. But young urban Pakistani woman is doing extremely well. You have to come here to see it, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I had another question actually about what parts or what aspects of Pakistani architecture do you think are applicable to other places in the world, like whether that's on a cultural scale or an ecological scale? What do you think? Yeah. What kind of lessons do you think Pakistani vernacular has to tell to the rest of the world?
Okay. Well, in the last two lectures I delivered, I really focused on that quite a bit with the RIBA as well as when I spoke with the Spitzer School of Architecture. And I really believe that now maybe we have to reverse the trend. So far, we've been looking at the global north to give us direction. Maybe the time has come for us to be looking at the global south to see what the traditions have been, because there's so much that people did without many resources, and they were able to do pretty well. And especially, if there is that constraint of funding enough money, then you find a lot of solutions. Your design capability has to work overtime, but you find a solution. And that's what's important today, rather than just going into very expensive solutions, which are high tech. So I'm talking about low impact, low tech kind of solutions, which can hark back to what I've seen, what I know about my own country. So I always give an example of this wind catcher in Tata in Sindh, which brings the cool air into the house. And I actually wrote a book on that. We did the documentation long before your guys were born. I mean, I'm talking of 1969 or 70, huh? So this was done, and that is there, and it's amazing kind of, and it's in many parts of the world, like Iran has it, and I think also in the Gulf states, it used to exist. Similarly, what I just talked about, the one in Peshawar, the Sethi House, there the courtyard is amazing because again, it stores the cool air at night, and then, it takes some time for the warm air to become the air to become warm with the sun. And so again, that's a system that can be adopted in many places. Then I don't know how familiar you might be with the Mughal architecture, but because I worked at the Lahore Fort, so I was able to study it pretty well. And there they have these fountains and water, and then Shalimar Gardens, the Paradisal Garden is amazing kind of place where just with the streams of water, it just cools the whole environment. So these are all these techniques that existed. And then when you look at these cities, I don't know if anyone of you is familiar with my Anguri Bagh housing, the social housing I did in the 70s. Anybody seen it? Or Well, apparently it's, I haven't seen it, but I was invited to see it because it's being exhibited at MoMA at New York currently. So we get a chance and have a look at it. That is all was done very long time ago. I mean, we're talking about early 70s, as I said. And that time I had taken, again, inspiration from an old town such as Lahore, because this all, so much life goes on in the open, on the terraces, at multi-level terraces in a city, because very dense. But as I said, it's a medium density, but it's very close and it's very low rise. And it works very well because I don't know, have you anybody heard of Jane Jacobs at all?
Oh, yes, we studied her in the urban design program.
You did, yeah. So, she had really wonderful ideas. And I think my generation was quite, influenced by that. But I also saw it in my own towns and cities. And I was trying to replicate it and it worked very well, because I got terraces on every level, although it was really low cost housing. I mean, we had to really do it so that, we could keep in a certain, very, very kind of limited budget. But it worked. And again, my thought was with women as to how women and children would live in that. How will they be able to survive and what could be done? Because open terraces are amazing. They're almost no cost, but they allow you to be able to grow things on that. You can have chickens there. You can have all kinds of other activities going on. And remember, in most of the countries where you get this kind of climate, which is hot and humid, outdoor spaces are very much the ones that people want to be in. And I think it's a good idea. And now with COVID-19, I think New York's, these multi-story towers are probably not as good as the one where you could come out at least on the street or somewhere in the open. So we have to be now looking at a lot of things that we didn't look at before. And certainly, I think if we can just reduce the number of vehicular streets and just convert them into walking streets and just put a lot of trees there and landscape them nicely and so on, that would be wonderful. I think that itself will make a lot of difference.
Yes, thank you for the commentary.
Any other questions?
And I might also say one thing that I said that time, which I just remembered, and that was that Mr. Bill Gates has written a book. Arguably, he's the most wealthy man today in the world. Is that what it is, Bill Gates? Something?
One of the wealthiest, but not the wealthiest. Either way, he's up in the top.
Well, I mean, that's pretty wealthy in that case, right?
Yeah.
So he has written a book on saying how do you avoid disasters, the climate change disasters, right? He decided 2 years ago that suddenly that was something that was important, so he wrote about it. And he says that all the solutions, or at least most of the solutions, will come from the West, or at least countries like the US, where there's unlimited amount of money available, and where universities can really find solutions. And then he goes on to say how you can really reduce the carbon in, for instance, production of steel. He said it will become very expensive, but then industry will pay for it, so that's all right. But so I feel that there's a lot of disdain and total dismissal of what is happening in the global South, where we have so many solutions which could be applicable. The principles could be applicable, and we should be looking at that. And why is the West or global North not looking at that? So I think we need to change that somehow. That's the balance I want to change, right? Yeah.
I definitely agree with that, considering that why should we constantly follow these wealthy white men? And really, it was wealthy white men who got us into this mess, frankly.
Well, also there's a whole colonial aspect you must remember.
Exactly.
Where we've always felt that whatever came from the West is the right thing for us. But I think now, I find that the solutions we are finding, because we have, and we should really be looking at very little money. Why are we looking for money? Money is not the most important thing. I mean, that's what I've learned in all these years that I've been working with the poor. We need to just find ways by which we empower them, and they will fend for themselves. There's no need to keep on looking at giving them largesse. No need at all for any one of us to take it, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk. Oh my gosh, I'm so inspired. I'm first generation, Pakistani American. So hearing you talk.
Oh, nice. Okay, very good. Great. Where are you from in Pakistan?
My parents are from Karachi. My mom is from Sukkar.
Really, nice. Okay. Well, tell her that, Khairpur, I've worked in Khairpur, it's one of the most beautiful areas and very, very beautiful. You must go and see Khairpur. Sakkar, of course, is partly British creation, but Khairpur is amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Okay,
will.
all
I
right.
will.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Sharik. Okay, all right, Sharik. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, shoot away. What is your question?
Yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit about your process, kind of making visible local knowledges, kind of how you just talked about the US and the West kind of erases and sort of flattens those local knowledges, and sort of concentrates political and economic power. But your design process is not just designing for local people or for local knowledge, but it's by and with local knowledges. And I'm curious about that, like specifically in your material practices, right? Because even across regions in Pakistan, like the Anguri, it's the brick making process, whereas closer to the floodplains, it's that bamboo making process. And I'm curious about these material practices, how they become sort of studied, investigated, and expanded on through your kind of interactions with local knowledge and local people.
Mhm. I'm very glad you raised this question, because I think they're the most important materials today for us in terms of dealing with climate change. So, because again, I was lucky, I'd had experience of using lime. And although lime has been used, as you know, for centuries, but it's used only for conservation. Anybody interested in heritage conservation? Have you done any work on heritage? Anybody? I don't know whether you guys have, but if you know people who might have, you use a lot of lime in that. You never are supposed to use cement, okay?
Mhm.
So I'd learned the use of lime, and but nobody, or not to my knowledge, there's never been large-scale application of lime in humanitarian work somehow. Although lime was used, but not necessarily with earth. And I was lucky I hit upon this formula when I started to use lime with earth, that it's so strong that it's as strong as anything that you might find with cement. So I started to use that. And although it's not something that the poor use, but we can teach them very quickly and very easily. And it started off with the chula, to tell you the truth, not with the earth brick. And I found that, I don't know whether you know much about lime, but there are two, at least there's one the usual practice of slaking lime is to do it with water. That's what we do for conservation work, okay? But that means that you have to really slake it and keep in water for the longest time to mature. And although we used it in the beginning, but it wasn't very successful in the sense that, we had to spend a lot of time in trying to see that it becomes benign and then it could be used. And then when we started the chula, the problem was that they could not carry the liquid in many places. So then I was studying, because I keep on trying to go through old material, and I found this manual of something like 1830s, where some British military man, I think, had written it, who wrote that they could spray water on lime, leave it overnight, and it would be benign the next day and it could be used. So nobody had ever done that, and we started to do this. And when we experimented, we found it was as good as the other lime, except that we would never use it for conservation, but for humanitarian work, that was perfectly okay, right? So that's how we found that, and now we just teach everybody how to use lime, and they're able to use it. But there's a lot of hesitancy in using lime, because lime can be a little dangerous if you're not careful. It can affect your eyes and your hands. But if you're careful, then really, if you keep away from it, then there's no problem. We've never had an accident in all these years. Perfectly okay. And I've got a video tutorial on how do you slake dry slake lime as well. So that's how we taught them. Now, bamboo is a material that actually has been used in Pakistan by the poor for the longest time, but nobody somehow realized, because they were the poor people who were doing it. So it never considered a material that was important or that could be really good for construction, but it's highly resilient. It's amazing how strong it is. And the problem with the poor was because none of us is there, so we have never taught them how to use these materials properly. So whatever they build would collapse, obviously. And of course, as you know, the earth walls, they get disintegrated and they also collapse. So that's why nobody uses earth. But the moment you use lime with it, then you're fine. You as stable and strong as anything else, right? So this is something that had to be convinced. And with the bamboo, they always ask me how come because a lot of times the villages, at least I was told by the international organizations also, that people will not accept my mud and bamboo structures because they all want paka, which is concrete block or brick. And I went ahead and I did the first one. I told people, why don't you climb on it? So 10, 15 people climbed on the roof, and suddenly it was true. They said, fine, they were happy with that. That's how we were able to build so many thousands of them. Because you have to tell them exactly how it will behave in a disaster, and then they're quite happy with it. And my bamboo, which I call the log, which is Lari octagreen, which is a combination of just these bamboo panels prefabricated that are put together in many different forms, that's become very popular because it goes up very fast. We train how to do it, and then once they know, and I've got videos, I think, on YouTube as well, where women are actually cutting and doing it. And now there's so many of our young women students who will go to London, and so will from Bangladesh, whom we've also trained, and they'll be from UK also, and 18 of them will put up my bamboo log in the square in London. So it is something that can be taught quite easily, and we need to promote it. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Not at all. So
Thank you so
that's
much.
it.
So, yes, I think that's our time for today. But thank you. That was really, really inspiring, and it's always really nice to hear about, already the changes being made in the architectural field, and like how we can contribute to like the footprints that have already been kind of set for us a little bit.
I have to add on a bit more to this, because I'm struggling now, because I've been, all these universities that I've been talking to and discussing it, and I'm saying it, and young people are asking me, how can we get involved if we want to do it? And that, I think, is a big issue. So I don't know yet, but just to tell you that I'm on it now, and there are some universities with whom I'm talking to, saying if they can create incubators and architectural incubators in the universities, which means that they would provide a space, provide handholding, provide funding in the first years, like they do for technology. Why can't they do it for architecture or for any kind of low carbon architecture? And if we can get universities to start, providing this assistance at the inception of anybody's career, then I think that will go a long way for them to be able to get stable and carry on, right? That's the first thing. Second, and I'm also talking to institutes, because when I was there at RIBA, when I spoke, the president of RIBA was there, and I especially asked him if they could do something. And then he's written a note to me, and I'm hoping to take that conversation forward. Also, because I will be going to UK to spend quite a bit of time, I've been invited to be what they call Arthur Marshall, a visiting professor at Cambridge University. So if I'm there, I've said to everybody, I want to have more discussions on them. So we're already in discussion with Vienna as well, and also Milano, as you know, was very kind. They gave me this honorary degree. I don't know whether you know about that. Do you know about that degree? It's a pretty important one. Politecnico di Milano gave me an honorary degree in October of last year. The first one in 158 years to a woman.
Wow.
So, that is something really significant. Anyway, so they're also, we're all working together on this, because I feel, and there too, I had a really long conversations with students, graduate students particularly. And I feel that that we need to find ways now for young people to be able to get engaged with this kind of work, right? And then why is it that very famous and wealthy practices do not have a wing? It's like a pro bono architecture wing where they provide the funding and young people are paid and they can do this work. So rather than what you sent me, Grana, what was it from the shop, this practice and.
Oh yes, the shop architects who were doing a union. We're trying to get the union.
Yes. So I'm not interested in the unions. I'm interested in providing assistance to young people who can then start doing the right thing. Okay. We need to be working on that rather than unions. At least because I don't believe in large practices anyway. So, but I'm the one to. Okay. All right. Okay. I hope it was okay for you guys and you got something out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
It was really amazing, really inspiring. I think like the biggest challenge of students is like what do we do? You know, like we're so excited about this stuff and we just want to be involved, and it's really inspiring to hear your work.
Yeah, well, you also think about it and see. And I mean, I'm always open to having discussions and talks. You can write to me and we can see. But from next year, when I'm in Cambridge, particularly, I think I'll be at it because I've been asked to speak at different universities, to be their guest professor or whatever. And so I will be talking about these issues wherever I can. And I do. And I will see that, you know, we somehow find a way by those, for those who want to practice in this way, how we can help. It says my generation and my younger ones also carry responsibility for you guys who will be graduating soon and coming out there, right? So let's see. Okay.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you take care.
Okay, take
You
care.
said
Thank you so much.
Brianna, Mystery, I couldn't refuse her because she, you know, made a sob story about being a one coming from AP. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear about, you know, women in Pakistan doing architecture and, you know, making it big and spreading word about, you know, our part of the world.
You pray now that this ploy works where I can get loans from different banks, and you know we spread it to at least 1 million people, 1 million households.
Exactly.
That's what my dream is. Okay. All right.
I'll follow up with you on email just to make sure you're okay with everything we're gonna write in our publication to keep it.
I know you're right. It doesn't matter. You just write. It doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have to get it from me. There's no problem there.
Okay.
You
Okay.
just write. That's okay. Yeah. Not a problem.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You take care.
Thank you.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Keep safe. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.